The Dark King. The Emperor ascended as the 5th Chaos God. Lately, everyone's been talking about him, but no one has been power scaling him. So of course, your favorite gravity-defying cow is gonna be the one to tackle him.
Woo! Yeah, baby! That's what I've been waiting for. That's what it's all about. Woo!
In this episode of Powerscaling Peeps, we're breaking it all down. Who the Dark King really is, the powers he would command as a Chaos God, and what he'd be capable of. After that, we'll stack him against the heaviest hitters in Warhammer 40K to see where he truly stands. By the end, you'll see why he's a galaxy-shaking force unlike anything we've ever seen in this setting. As always heard, it's time to power scale. So let's start with answering the question, who is the Dark King? The Dark King is a theoretical 5th Chaos God, prophesized by both the Eldar and humanity throughout history. While hints of him appear in scattered lore, he is first overtly mentioned during the final stages of the Siege of Terra in the novels The End and the Death. Unlike the other ruinous powers, which thrive on excess, decay, rage, or change, the Dark King embodies complete and utter destruction, without reason, purpose, or even Chaos's usual twisted logic. Initially, many throughout the Warhammer community speculated that the Dark King might actually be Horus Lubercal, but as the Siege of Terra reached its climax, it became very clear the one fated to embody the Dark King was the Emperor of Mankind himself. It's actually implied that Horus was the Chaos God's plan all along to push the Emperor into becoming the Dark King. Horus, who is known as the Sacrificial King, did as he was fated. When the Emperor boarded the Vengeful Spirit to confront Horus, he realized the full extent of his fallen son's power. If you haven't watched my Horus Lubercal video, I would suggest checking it out. It of course goes into autistically deep into how truly powerful Horus was at this point in the Siege of Terra. In short, he could alter reality, time, and space. But still, with all that power, he couldn't grow hair. To bridge that gap, the Emperor drew upon the warp on a scale previously unseen. His power was so immense that even his custodians were reduced to scorched husks in his presence, while demons, traitors, and corrupted Astartes fled in terror. For a moment, the Emperor teetered on the edge of becoming a Chaos God. The Dark King made flesh. It was only the intervention of Alana's person, John Grammaticus, Leetu, and Garviel Loken that saved him. Olanus reminded the Emperor of his humanity, warning him that this power was a trap Chaos had set. Relenting, the Emperor cast aside his transformation, blasting much of the warp's corruption from Terra and temporarily denying the Dark King's birth. So what did the Dark King look like? In The End and the Death, the Dark King is described as a colossal black orb, a singularity of oblivion capable of consuming all in existence. A polished black moon resting on the earth, white smoke smoldering from its surface, ringed with silent lightning, blindingly dark, yet the source of all light.
You're not making any sense at all.
I know, it sounds a little intense, but hey, I'm just taking it from the book. In essence, the Dark King is one of the 8 primordial abstract forces of the ether, the highest subconcepts of reality itself. He is the Emperor's dark self and possibly more powerful than the Chaos Gods combined. Now before we get to power scaling Big Daddy E as a fallen Chaos God, we need to talk about the Star Child first. This is gonna be a little bit of an autistic cowhole. To stop himself from tipping into annihilation, the Emperor actually tore away a part of his own soul. The pieces tied to compassion, loyalty, and hope. That fragment became what the community calls the Star Child. A potential warp entity fueled by the noblest aspects of humanity's faith. By casting it out, the Emperor achieved 2 things. First, he steeled himself for the coming battle against Horus and Chaos by removing the traits that could weaken him with guilt or self-hatred. And 2, he created an independent shard of his soul, hope, loyalty, and compassion personified, that could one day grow into a godlike protector of mankind. For now, the Star Child deserves its own deep dive. But the important point here is that the Emperor has always walked a razor's edge between becoming a god of hope or a god of annihilation. Even though the Emperor resisted once, The Chaos Gods consider the Dark King's rise inevitable. Time doesn't flow normally in the warp. From their perspective, he already exists. It's just a matter of time when the Materium catches up. Additionally, the end in the death suggests that at some point, the Emperor may have to make the choice again. But there's also a darker possibility, that the Dark King doesn't come through Ascension, but through the Emperor's death. If that happens, humanity itself can unravel. Reality might collapse into a storm of pure chaos, and in that nightmare future, even the Imperium's greatest defenders, the Grey Knights, Custodians, Sisters of Battle, the Inquisition, could end up serving him not by choice, but by inevitability. Denial and desperation would twist into worship, until even humanity's protectors bowed to the King of Ruin. If the Dark King ever manifests fully, he might be the end of the galaxy itself. So that's the Dark King in the lore. It may be grasping at straws a little bit, I have to admit. But I'm not simply making this stuff up, guys. I'm serious. Throughout the End in the Death Part 1, 2, and 3, we get a lot of mentions and looks at the potential the Emperor has as the Dark King. So don't think I'm being a nonsensical cow. I'm actually doing a lot of research for this fella, and I'm pulling my conclusions from actually established parts from those books. But yes, that is the Dark King in the lore. He may be a god that almost was, a god that still could be, and a god whose essence embodies annihilation itself. But what would he actually do if he ascended? What powers would he wield? And how would he compare to the other strongest beings in the Warhammer 40K universe? Let's jump into the cow hole, fellas. The Dark King is described in the narrative as a being so powerful that even the warp itself is subservient to him, and the Chaos Gods are ghosts in his shadow. His presence is called terrible, inconceivable, unimaginable, and it is said that every atom of the universe will be changed by him. This is all seen in the End of the Death Part 2. This places the Dark King firmly as one of the strongest beings in the universe and in 40K in general. He is untethered to physical space, dimensions, or time, capable of creating, destroying, or reshaping all forms of reality, universes, and dimensions at will, and is completely outside the scope of the warp, which is normally the source of all possibility. In other words, the Dark King transcends all cosmology. Even the almighty warp, which contains every conceivable dimension and possibility, is described as powerless before him. From the End in the Death Part 2, the cardinal powers of chaos are but ghosts in his shadow, and the almighty warp obeys his voice, helpless in his tidal pull. This is significant because the Chaos Gods themselves are normally capable of reshaping reality, bending space and time, and manipulating matter, energy, and possibility to their will. Yet the Dark King still eclipses them entirely. When we examine the Emperor's near transformation into the Dark King, the scale of his power becomes very clear. He is described as becoming a thing of absolutes, with no shred of humanity or perpetuality remaining, ascending to a level where he can dominate all of existence. He was everywhere and everything, fusing and burning everything around him, spreading his influence across all nows, across infinity itself. Even the perception of him is overwhelming. Observers report a consuming black radiance, as bright and ferocious as a star, which blazes across every battlefield, bleaches reality itself, and affects minds and souls across countless realms. The End in the Death Part 2 emphasizes that both real space and the warp trembled under the force of his near incarnation. Electrons faltered, and the very structure of creation seemed to recoil from his power. This is the Dark King's transcendence, an entity whose mind and will outstrip all of creation, for whom existence itself is subjective. His very presence rewrites reality, placing him beyond comprehension, beyond containment, and beyond any rival. In essence, the Dark King is the Emperor Unbound, a singular, absolute force of will, judgment, and destruction. He embodies ultimate ruin, the finality of annihilation, and the purest, most focused form of chaos. Unlike the other ruinous powers who are defined by conflict, desire, or excess, the Dark King represents one inescapable drive, the total destruction of all things.
Well, we're fucked.
His near incarnation at the Siege of Terra was a cosmic event that shook both real space and the warp. Every atom, every moment, across infinite realities felt the tremor of his power, and though the Emperor chose to halt his hypothesis, the narrative suggests that the Dark King's rise is inevitable, a force that may one day fully incarnate and claim dominion over all existence. So, yeah, he's kind of freaking broken, herd. The Dark King is on an entirely different level. He transcends the warp, reality itself, and nearly became the 5th Chaos God. But to truly understand how broken this Mama Jamma is, let's scale him against the most formidable entities in the 40k universe. We're talking Primarchs, Demon Primarchs, God Emperor Horus Lupercal, the Tyranid Hivemind, Gork and Mork, full-on Catan shards like the Void Dragon or the Night Reaper, and finally, the Chaos Gods themselves. Make your bets, people. Make your bets. We're starting with the Primarchs. The Primarchs are the Emperor's ultimate creations, each one a fusion of intellect, psychic potential, and physical prowess. Rogel Dorn could orchestrate the defense of a star system as if it was a chessboard, while Vulcan survives injuries that could annihilate entire armies, Leman Russ can rend mountains, and Lionel Johnson strikes with unmatched precision. They are essentially demigods in combat and psychic ability. Yet the Dark King operates on a scale so far removed that their full might is meaningless. Imagine Leman Russ attempting a direct strike, swinging his blade with all his strength and psychic precision. The Dark King wouldn't simply dodge. In an instant, Leman Russ's existence across every timeline and reality could be unmade. His abilities to regenerate, manipulate the warp, or even perceive the battlefield are inconsequential because the Dark King exists outside of the framework they occupy. Their powers are immense in the context of the material realm, but against a being whose consciousness spans all atoms and moments simultaneously, Primarchs are effectively sparks in a cosmic blaze. To put it in the simplest terms, they're completely fucked.
I used to fuck guys like you in prison.
Then we have the Demon Primarchs, such as Angron, Mortarion, and Magnus, who are terrifying entities even by galactic standards. Angron channels unending rage capable of obliterating entire planetary garrisons, Mortarion brings disease and decay on planetary scales, and Magnus can manipulate warp energy to alter reality, matter, space, or even time. Yet, their power is still bound by the warp. The Dark King, who exists outside of all such confines, requires no physical engagement to defeat them. Imagine Mortarion leading a charge of demon hordes while Magnus attempts to alter the Dark King itself. The King of Ruin would simply perceive their form and unravel them, atom by atom and thought by thought, neutralizing the entirety of their presence without lifting a finger. The warp powers, physical might, and demonic legions collapse as concepts, leaving only echoes that never fully existed. A clash with the Dark King would leave these warp boys with more than just daddy issues. Next, we have Horus Lupercal. And as we all know, in my cow-shaped opinion, there are 5 forms of Horus Lupercal, and his strongest is the version we're going to be looking at, God Emperor Horus Lupercal. At the peak of his corruption, he is infused with the favor of all 4 Chaos Gods. His psychic might can distort planetary systems, and his combat prowess allowed him to bully the Emperor like a small child. Yet, the Dark King, as the unbound, dark aspect of the Emperor, is beyond even him. Picture Horus unleashing a storm of warp fire across a battlefield or tearing reality to strike at the Dark King. Every move would be anticipated and undone at the source. The Dark King could unmake Horus's forms across realities simultaneously, dissolve his powers before they fully materialize, and rewrite the very battlefield to erase all threats.
Well, that's just silly.
Even in his strongest form, Horus represents only a slight surge of power against a mind that will encompass all that exists across all times and possibilities. That's pretty damn crazy, seeing that Horus Lupercal in his God Emperor form is, in my opinion, one of the strongest beings we've ever seen in the 40k setting. After him, we have the Tyranid Hivemind. The Tyranid Hivemind is a galaxy-spanning intelligence, able to coordinate countless bioships, planetary infestations, and neural networks. It adapts, strategizes, and overwhelms entire sectors with terrifying efficiency. Yet, like everyone else we've talked about, this scale is irrelevant against the Dark King. From lone hive tyrants to vast hive fleets exist within the physical and warp boundaries that the Dark King can simply ignore. If the hive mind attempted to overwhelm him with swarms across dozens of star systems, he could destroy every organism at will, severing their hive mind links and dissolving biomass, leaving no trace. Its strategies, adaptations, and the sheer number of Tyranids are meaningless against a being whose consciousness and intent operate across every now and then, collapsing all complexity into nothingness. Essentially, the Dark King is the best bug spray. After them, we have Gork and Mork. The Orc gods embody cunning and brute strength, though no one can ever agree which one is which. Together, they can twist reality to reflect Orc belief, fueling endless wogs across the galaxy. Imagine Gork launching an infinite barrage of crushing blows, while Mork lays traps across the cosmos. To the Dark King, though, their efforts are theater. He wouldn't need to dodge or counter, their blows would dissipate before landing, their constructs collapsing before they took shape. Their combined force would look impressive, like fireworks exploding in the void, but ultimately leaving nothing behind. After the true gets, we have the full-on Catan shards. The star gods and the Necrons, and even in their fragmented state, they wield staggering power. The Void Dragon devours suns and manipulates technology on a galactic scale, while the Nightbringer can unmake matter and life across entire systems. But their might is tied to the laws of the material universe, laws that the Dark King once again stands outside of. If they unleashed their full might, he can unravel their very framework that allows their powers to function. To entities bound by physics and energy, facing something that rewrites those foundations is not a battle, guys. It's checkmate before they can even act. And then finally, we have the Chaos Gods. At the pinnacle stand the four: Khorne, Tzeentch, Nurgle, and Slaanesh. Each rules over vast swaths of the warp and embodies a fundamental truth of existence. Khorne's endless rage can topple armies and gods alike. Tzeentch bends causality and fate itself. Nurgle's rot consumes stars and civilizations with inevitability, while Slaanesh enslaves entire species with irresistible desire. Together, they've reshaped the galaxy and opposed the Emperor himself. But the Dark King is not another player on the board. He is outside the game entirely. Khorne's war would unravel before it began, stripping it of its meaning. Tzeentch's webs of fate would collapse as the Dark King defines it for himself. Nurgle's plagues would vanish as disease and decay lose their foundation, and Slaanesh's excess would evaporate as psychic resonance itself is rewritten. Even a full coordinated assault would be futile. The Chaos Gods would roar across infinite realities, unleashing storms of demons, corruption, and psychic annihilation, and the Dark King, with a single thought, would render it all void, effectively destroying the Chaos Gods and leaving the universe a bare void. Now I know this is a little confusing. The Chaos Gods are not physical beings. They are warp entities made of the emotions of the collective species in the galaxy. So how would the Dark King strike down the Chaos Gods? Well, since he is the god of ruin and the god of destruction, his ultimate goal would to bring ruin to the whole galaxy and the universe in general, which in turn would starve the Chaos Gods, effectively killing them off, leaving the Dark King the sole victor and ruler of the 40K universe. So no, he wouldn't be physically striking at them. In reality, he would be destroying their domains in the material realm. For example, a Slaanesh pleasure cult. With the Dark King bringing ruin to the whole galaxy, the cult would most likely fail and thus rob Slaanesh of her worshippers. Imagine that magnified billions of times, and the Chaos Gods would slowly lose all their worshippers and then, like I just stated, would be effectively destroyed. I hope that makes sense. The subject of the Dark King is very controversial, so I hope I covered that correctly. But if you want an even shorter explanation, then simply put, the Dark King would wreck everyone's shit. Yikes, yikes. I hope the Emperor doesn't decide to get off that chair and become a silly Dark King. So before we wrap this video up, I want to dip into theory mode for a bit. Let's talk about the Star Child, the Dark King, and the Emperor, and what they might mean for the future of 40K. Right now, the Emperor sits on the Golden Throne, and we know it's failing. The warp is getting more unstable by the day, and at the same time, we've got Constantine Valdor, or depending on how much stock you put in, the King in Yellow theory, searching for or maybe already holding the Emperor's true name. Alongside that, he's building an army of custodies, winged space marines, and clone blanks. Meanwhile, the Star Child has started to poke its head back into the lore. We have seen hints of it in miracles, visions, or maybe even direct intervention. The idea here is that the Star Child and the throne-bound Emperor aren't separate rivals, but fragments of the same being, and they may need to be reunited or stabilized if the Emperor is going to avoid sliding back into becoming the Dark King. Now, where things get really interesting is with the new Terminus Decree. That decree empowers the Grey Knights to act if the Emperor ever tries to ascend or leave the Golden Throne. Basically, it's a doomsday failsafe. Return him to the throne or put him back in the box if necessary. But imagine the fallout of that situation. The Custodies, High Lords, and most likely the entire structure of the Imperium would resist. And then we even have Cypher, another plot point, who the Emperor himself told not yet, which to me reads like someone planning to strike. But the timing has to be absolutely perfect. So what could happen? I see two possible paths. One that is a subtle change, and one that is a complete radical shift to the setting. In the subtle version, the Emperor's presence on the throne is flickering, but Valdor, the Grey Knights, and the agents of the Star Child all quietly work or clash to hold things together. You have Valdor attempting to plug the webway with his army of blanks, clones, and oily boys, Cypher trying to shank Big E, and the Star Child trying to reunite with its lost shard. There's a lot of points to work here. Maybe they recover the Emperor's true name, maybe they patch over the fractures in his soul, maybe they stabilize things just enough so he doesn't become the Dark King. The Star Child might get more active behind the scenes, but the throne stays central and the Imperium keeps chugging along. We get change, but not a total overhaul to the setting. But then we have the radical shift, this spicier version. The Emperor's drift towards the Dark King accelerates. His darker aspects breaks loose into the warp, maybe even challenging the Big Four directly. Meanwhile, the Star Child becomes the counterbalance, the new face of humanity's survival. Valdor, if he really is the King in Yellow, could use the Emperor's true name to rebind him, pulling the Star Child back from oblivion or forcing a split. In this version, the Emperor might literally fracture into two beings, the Dark King in the warp and the Star Child guiding humanity. This would give us a new big bad, a new order, and a serious shakeup of the entire setting. Now, will Games Workshop ever actually do something this bold? Who knows? Probably not. But we can't ignore the pattern. The throne is failing in the Vaults of Terra books. The Star Child and the Dark King were both explicitly name-dropped in The End in the Death. Valdor is moving pieces behind the scenes, and even Dan Adnet has teased that the finale for his Eisenhorn series will shake up the setting entirely. Put all of that together, and there's just enough smoke to make me think there's fire here. God damn, that's a fucking great metaphor. Pat on the back, Cow. Pat on the back. But in the regards to the Dark King, across the full spectrum of Warhammer 40K, he eclipsed every challenger. Primarchs are unmade in an instant, Demon Primarchs collapse conceptually, the God Emperor Horus is nullified before his mind manifests, the Tyranid Hive Mind unravels, Gork and Mork's efforts are meaningless, full Catan shards are dissolved, and the Chaos Gods themselves are reduced to powerless echoes. The Dark King does not merely defeat opponents, he overwrites the framework of their existence entirely. Physical power, psychic ability, warp mastery, and cosmic influence are irrelevant against a being whose mind, will, and presence dominates every aspect of reality. The Dark King is the apex of all 40k power, the ultimate destroyer of the universe, capable of reshaping, unmaking, and annihilating all that exists within the force of his thought alone. The Dark King would, hands down, be the strongest being in 40k. He's inevitability in a crown, the destroyer of destroyers, and honestly, the only fair fight left for him might be against Jesus Christ or hell, Goku. And even then, I'm betting on the Dark King. Shout out our Patreon and YouTube memberships, Ritter S, Ryania Basket, Omar, Keydree, and Soft Use. This has been a pretty fun video to make, and it's definitely not as long as what you guys are probably used to. October is gonna be a really busy month for me personally. I am traveling around and have a lot of activities going on, cause of course, it's Halloween. I'm going to try to hit the 4 or 5 videos you guys usually get every month, but if I don't hit that, please be gentle with my cow udders. The next video we'll be releasing is a special crossover episode I've been talking a lot about in my Discord and Patreon. It'll be Sukuna enters the 40K universe. I'm really looking forward to that one because it is a completely different video from what I usually make. It'll be based in a narrative approach, so I hope you guys keep your eyes peeled for that one. I intend to continue more crossovers in the future, probably with Yuhapa vs the Emperor next. I hope you guys enjoyed this edition of Powerscaling Peeps, and I intend to powerscale even more characters in the future, maybe even ones as hypothetical as a Dark King. As always, my favorite cows in the whole universe, stay milk turd. I'll see ya in the next video.